What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Busters podcast. Today is Thursday, January 19th. My name is Will. Joining me is my co-host Eric, and this is actually part two of our Dynasty Trait Targets videos. You want to check out part one for the quarterbacks and tight ends, you can go back and check that out. But today we're going to talk about the running backs and wide receivers, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to start out with our goodbyes, and we're going to check out Mr. J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm going to go ahead and let Eric take this one away.
Yeah, so I just want to make kind of a preface for the running back position in general, because I do think that these guys are good buys, but overall, I wouldn't really suggest acquiring running backs right now. The influx of talent at the position that's on its way from the 2023 draft class is probably going to drive all of the veteran running back prices down. So maybe this is something that you would want to wait on a little bit for in season or just after that rookie hype cycle. But we'll get into it specifically with these guys. Like you said, J.K. Dobbins, he's ranked as the RB17 on Keep Trade Cut. And again, if you don't know what Keep Trade Cut is, it's just kind of like a market value for the Dynasty community and how they value a lot of these players. So go check out that site. It's a valuable resource, I think. J.K. Dobbins listed as the RB17, which I think is too low. He is a really special athlete. I think he's an incredibly efficient runner, and he's in the perfect offense to take advantage of his talents. He's really dangerous when he gets to the second level, as evidenced by some of these stats that I can share with you. He's fourth among running backs in true yards per carry, ninth in yards per touch, second in juke rate, and third in breakaway run rate. So when he hits that second level, he's liable to take it to the house any given time.
Yeah. So J.K. Dobbins, even though he was out there on 1.5 legs last year, still ended up being a pretty good running back asset. So going into next year, he should only be better. And like you said, in a good situation where he's already an elite runner. So hopefully that also continues to go up.
And that's part of why, the main reason why his price went, because of the way that was handled, where he came back a little bit too early and didn't look 100%. So I think you can take advantage of that going next season. He will be 100%.
Absolutely. And then next up on the list for good buys, we have Mr. Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans.
This one might come as a surprise to Dynasty players. We're talking about a 29-year-old running back. He is listed as the running back 18 on Keep Trade Cut. So I will say this one is only for contenders. If you're rebuilding, don't buy Derrick Henry. Doesn't make sense. But if you're looking to compete this year, I think Derrick Henry is your guy, because literally every single year that we doubt the king, he proves us wrong. We've seen it for 4 straight years. He's literally been a top 5 running back for all of the past 4 years. And like, sure, he's 29, but so what? He's Derrick Henry. He's a different animal. He's not your typical 29-year-old running back. I refuse to bet against him at this point, and he just continues to prove, that he's one of the best in the league.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes to show that, like, the more they've been using Derrick Henry, the more ways they found to use Derrick Henry. Like, they've started using him in the passing game more later in his career. Who would have thought that would happen? But Derrick Henry, he started to evolve even a little bit more. So he is towards, I feel like, the end of his prime for sure. But at the same time, he's still a viable asset because they love to run this offense through Derrick Henry. So he's always going to be an asset there in Tennessee.
Yeah, and people love to overvalue like ageism in Dynasty, and so having a 29-year-old running back like that, he's going to be valued too low, as evidenced by his ranking on Keep Trade Cut.
Yeah, man, like, don't be a DiCaprio. Hold on to your players as long as they're valuable. You know what I'm saying? So,
at least in Derrick Henry's case, I think there's a good case to be made to get out, while the getting's good. But with Derrick Henry, he's a different beast.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to take a look at our cheaper options. Again, like the last video, just more guys that, like, a little bit riskier, but the value is going to be there, you know what I'm saying? So not as much of a risk. You don't have to give us as much, but I'm floundering right now. The player is Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers.
Nah, bro, you're not floundering. All of that made perfect sense.
Yeah, you know.
I do know. It sounded good, bro. Anyway, Aaron Jones is listed as the running back 27 on Keep Trade Cut. Again, he is an older guy. This would be a contender buy, not a rebuilder buy. And again, we're talking about running backs as dynasty buys. Preface again, probably want to avoid these guys until later in the offseason once the rookie hype cycle is over. But for Aaron Jones, he's just a lot better than people give him credit for. He's one of the better pure rushers in the entire league, evidenced by the fact that he's been among the league leaders in rushing yards over expected year after year. And obviously he adds a lot in the passing game as well. He had 59 receptions and 5 receiving touchdowns this year, which might have been less than a lot of people expected. We were talking throughout the offseason about the splits between him and Devontae Adams when Devontae wasn't on the field. We didn't get quite the boom year in the receiving game that we wanted from Aaron Jones, but I think that's part of why he's so discounted, because he didn't live up to the expectations people set on him for this year. He still finished as the RB9 in what a lot of people consider to be a disappointing year for him. So I just think the RB27 is too low of a value for him, and he's going to continue to produce above that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree because, like you said, he finishes the RB9. Now, was he the picture of consistency throughout the season? No.
No.
But it also was kind of hard to find consistency from anyone out there, to be honest with you, unless you had one of those top tier elite guys. So it's one of those
And
ones. What's that?
even harder to find it from anybody on the Green Bay offense. That whole thing was a shit show this season.
Yeah, so you're hoping that that changes going forward, but also Aaron Jones, not a bad player in himself, even if he is on a bad team as we saw last year when they weren't performing. He was still doing pretty well himself, so Aaron Jones.
Yep.
And that's going to round out the running back position for us. We're actually going to get into the wide receiver position, and we're going to get into the must-acquire category. This is the players that we feel like that you have to smash the button on. Their value's at the perfect spot right now where you can really obtain them in an not an easy way, but they are an obtainable player that we feel like is going to be really, really good going forward. And their metrics show nothing but that. And the first player we got on there is Mr. Treylon Burks of the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. I absolutely love Treylon Burks as a buy. I love him as a player just in general. Trade cut value. He's sitting at wide receiver 25. That's just way, way, way too low than where he should be at, considering what he put on tape this season. I think Treylon Burks or not, it would have been hard for anyone to have a good fantasy season if you put them in his situation and had them go through what he went through this year. As is typical, rookie wide receivers start slow and then pick up steam as the season goes along. So that's what we saw from him. We saw a slow start, but then he suffered a serious turf toe injury in week 4 that put him on crutches and kept him out for 5 weeks. And then when he came back, it didn't really seem like he looked 100%, but he was still actually producing pretty well with a couple double-digit fantasy performances. But he only got in 3 games before he then suffered a concussion. So he just really didn't ever have a chance to get going. And then on top of all that, he was in a very low passing volume offense with a quarterback carousel consisting of Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, and Josh Dobbs. So, like, with all of that being said, when he was on the field, I think the tape looked really, really, really good. He used his size and athletic ability to his advantage, winning at all levels of the field. And he commanded a 20.8% target rate, which for a rookie is incredibly impressive. So for this guy to be ranked behind Christian Watson, George Pickens, Jerry Jeudy, like, I just think his upside is a lot higher. And honestly, I think his floor might be higher than a lot of those guys. And then also guys that I think it's fair to put above him, but the gap is too big. Like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson from the same draft class. Like, yeah, I like them a lot. They should be valued around that top 10 area. But then why is Treylon Burks 15 spots lower down at 25?
Yeah, it doesn't really make too much sense, honestly, because when he was out there on the field, like you said, he showed off a lot of alpha tendencies and a lot of alpha numbers. So going forward, we can only expect that to be the same next year or even better. So
should be better. Yeah.
And then moving on, we are going to move on to the good buys of our section of our wide receivers, and we are going to start with Mr. DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, DK, I almost don't want to read any of this and just say, look at him. Look at the dude, man. Why wouldn't you want to buy DK? He's a freak. It's crazy. But nah, let me be for real. He's the keep trade cut wide receiver 12. And I think that that's a little bit too low. I don't think it's crazy undervalued, but some of the names that he's behind, you could definitely debate him being higher. But as far as DK's performance, I think there were 2 major changes for DK this year compared to the rest of his career. One, his yards per target was down fairly substantially from 10.1 to 7.4. Now, I'd like to see that number come back up a little bit, but I don't think that it's all bad. It seems like that change correlated with him being used more as a possession receiver as opposed to just being a deep threat. And so that role change led to him setting career highs in targets and receptions this year, which was really encouraging. And then also the decrease in yards per target, excuse me, will likely be offset by the increased number of touches year over year. So I'm not too worried that even if that number stays where it is right now, that he won't be able to produce for fantasy. And then the second major change that we saw was a dramatic decrease in touchdowns. In 2020 and 2021, he scored 10 and 12 touchdowns respectively. This year, he only got in the end zone 6 times, which was a career low for him, even from his rookie season. And so if he scored the same amount of touchdowns that he did last year, his overall ranking would have jumped from wide receiver 18 up to wide receiver 7, and we'd be talking about him a lot differently. And like, I can't just assign touchdowns to him that he didn't get. I'm not saying it like that. I'm just saying touchdowns are a really variable stat to begin with, and you can't count on them year over year. But I think that if he's for the last 3 years been well above that number, I think he's going to get back to that.
No, I think that's an absolutely fair statement. And he's got the best quarterback to put on the Seattle jersey back there for him now. So, you know what I'm
Oh
saying?
boy.
Those numbers are just going to keep going up. You know what I'm saying?
Damn straight.
And then next up on the list, we got Mr. Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, so he is listed on Keep Trade Cut as the wide receiver 14. Again, I don't think it's egregious. This is why he's a good buy and not necessarily a must add, but I think it is a little bit too low for him. Drake London is a really, really special blend of size, speed, and skill. He is 6'4". He has 34-inch arms, which put him in the 95th percentile, and he has a size adjusted speed score in the 73rd percentile. But everybody knew that he was big. Most people were worried that he couldn't separate. But I think for sure, after watching the tape and hearing from people that are much better at watching film than I am, he dispelled that myth in Atlanta this year by displaying really good route running and an ability to maintain speed through his breaks that you just typically don't see from a guy as big as he is. And also his target share numbers were absolutely elite. His overall target share for the season was 29.4%. That ranked 5th in the NFL amongst wide receivers. His red zone target share was even higher at 32.6%. So they're using their big-bodied wide receiver in the right way, unlike Kyle Pitts. They should be using him a little bit more in the red zone. If you didn't see our other video talking about tight ends, we talked about him there. But then Drake London, also his targets per route run was at 32.4%, which ranked 2nd in the entire NFL. So I just think this guy is a total stud. The only reason he's valued this low is because of his situation.
Yeah, it's literally Atlanta just has to get a guy who can throw the ball to a receiver.
Yeah.
If they do that, those guys are going to be really good out there, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and again, I did the same thing in the quarterback and tight end video, but please, can we pray and hope for Lamar Jackson to come to Atlanta?
Hell
We
yeah.
got to make this happen, guys. We got to make it happen.
Hell yeah. And next up on the list, someone who I believe is super criminally underrated. We got Mr. Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I absolutely love Hollywood here. He was a buy for me last offseason. I did buy into him in a lot of transition from Baltimore to Arizona. And I think he has another buy window open for him right now. He's listed as the Keep Trade Cut wide receiver 29. And I think that that's just because he got hurt. I think it's as simple as that. Prior to suffering the foot sprain in week 6, Hollywood was averaging 15.7 points per game. And if he had kept that up on the full season, that would have made him the wide receiver 7. But then when he came back from the injury, he still didn't look like he was 100%. And he didn't have Kyler throwing him the ball anymore. We were talking about him getting thrown the ball from Colt McCoy and Chris Straveller. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it was a gross group of backup quarterbacks that really couldn't get the job done for him. So I think that explains away his late season struggles. And then in terms of the future and why I think he's a good buy, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be gone this season. They've already talked about shipping him off in a trade. And based on the draft capital given to acquire Hollywood, I would imagine that he has a really nice deal this offseason, making him the wide receiver 1 in Arizona for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and Marquise Brown, really good talent when he is out there and he is healthy on the field. So really you're just hoping he stays healthy at this point, which I believe he fully can.
For sure.
And then the next player we got on our list, someone who is suffering from a lot of recency bias, Mr. Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Again, it's situation, and I think the main theme of a lot of these receivers is buy the talent over the situation. Things will work out eventually. Deontay is a really talented guy. He's listed as the wide receiver 31 on Keep Trade Cut, and he was just incredibly unlucky this season. If we look at PPR scoring, he finished as the wide receiver 34. But according to Ian Hartitz on Twitter, go give him a follow. He's a fantastic resource. He also finished as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy points below expectation at negative 72.6. That just means that he scored 72.6 points less than what would have been expected for a player receiving the same amount of volume and opportunity that he saw this season. And for a little bit more context, the number 2 ranked wide receiver on this list is also on our buys, is Drake London. his number was negative 35.5. So legit, Deontay doubled him up in the amount of points that he didn't score below expectation. But if Deontay Johnson had scored exactly the amount that he was expected to this season based on that usage, it would have vaulted him all the way from wide receiver 34 to wide receiver 10 in fantasy finish. So again, you can't just assign those points to him. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that he, as a player, is probably he's closer to that wide receiver 10 range than he is to that wide receiver 34. It's just situation at this point.
Yeah, so going forward, Deontay Johnson should be a safe bet. But hey, if we're talking about bets, we got a gambling man up next. We got
Oh,
Mr.
Segway Master.
Got Mr. Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars now, formerly the Atlanta Falcons. But yeah, we can go ahead and talk about that one right there.
Yeah, so he's listed as the wide receiver 37 on Keep Trade Cut. I think this one's pretty simple. His value dropped way too much from the suspension. He was the wide receiver 24 on Keep Trade Cut before getting suspended, and now he's the wide receiver 37. The only things that have changed between now and then is that he's a year old, he's 28, and now he's on a better offense with a better quarterback than the one that he left. I still think Ridley is an elite talent, and I'm trying to buy him wherever I can.
Yeah, just based off of value alone and just where he was at before the suspension, if he's even a fraction of that, let's say he's even 75% of that, he's still a really, really good asset to have in fantasy. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's
For
still
sure.
really good. So,
Yeah.
he's definitely someone I take the over on, So, we're going to we're going to move on to our cheaper options, somebody we think is still a good buy, maybe get him for a little bit less, but still should have some great value to him. And that is another Arizona Cardinals wide receiver, Mr. Rondale Moore.
Yeah, so this one, there is a little bit of risk baked in. There's risk baked into all of these, but I think because of how low he's valued and the amount that you'd have to give to acquire him just wouldn't be that much. So I'm not too worried about it. He's currently valued on Keep Trade Cut as the wide receiver 50. So let me get into his specific spiel here. I'm a little bit more worried about him now that Cliff Kingsbury is gone, actually. And that's not because I liked Cliff. I think we've made that very clear that we did not like Cliff. But the slot wide receiver was featured prominently in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. And that's actually what we saw from Rondale this year when he was healthy. And that's another concern with Rondale is his health. Typically, we say that we can't predict injuries, but in this case, he does have a fairly extensive injury history that's followed him from the college to the pros. He does have a lot of repeat injuries to the same body parts, so it does become a little bit more predictable and he is a little bit more susceptible to injuries. So we hope that he's going to stay healthy, but he's probably the closest thing to injury prone that we can really talk about. But as far as like I'm talking about all these negatives, so you're probably wondering why he's a buy. Mostly because I just think he's way too cheap for someone as talented as he is, and with the amount of opportunity that I think he's likely to receive. These are small sample sizes, but in the 7 full games that he played this year, he saw 8 or more targets in 5 of them. And in those games, he averaged 12.5 fantasy points per game. Now, he's not going to get 8 targets every game. I know that. But if he can get anywhere close to that, we're talking about a back end wide receiver 2, all the way down at wide receiver 5 prices.
Yeah, and for that kind of value, you can't give that up. Like, you have to go for it. It's way too good. And Rondale Moore, when he is out there on the field, like you said, he performs. So hopefully this new coaching staff, this new regime still finds clever ways to use Rondale Moore, as good of a player as he is, going forward. And yeah, that's actually going to round out this video. It's going to round out our wide receiver spot. Thank you guys for watching. Yeah, just keep an eye out for these players. Try to be smart about it. Like we said with the running backs, just to reiterate that point at the end that we said, don't try to buy them right now. You can wait a little bit because their value should go down after the draft and after we find out where these rookies have landed, because this running back class coming in is really good. So hold off on it, but just to get you guys thinking, because that's what this is all about. It's about Dynasty. You got to think. You got to have that foresight. You know what I'm saying? So
exactly.
Yeah. So with that being said, hopefully you guys got some good value out of this video, and you guys hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, so when we drop all our future videos, you can like, comment, drop down in the comments any questions that you have, anything, or if you want to just even talk, man, we can talk down in the comments. You know what I'm saying?
Hit us up.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And then also, you can check us out in the description if you want to find us on our other socials. Be able to find our Twitter, our TikTok. We have a lot of short form content, some helpful videos, just some fun little bullshit that we put together just to have a little bit of fun. So, Eric, do you have anything for the people before we get out of here?
Nah, man. This was fun. I'm glad that we got to do these trade targets. Hope you guys gained something valuable. But yeah, check us out. We got a lot more videos coming down the pipeline. And yeah, we'll see you then. Peace.
Peace.